Welcome, ladies and gents. I'm Dan the Man Muñoz, host of Movie Menu Interviews, where we interview up-and-coming filmmakers to discuss their films from idea to completion. On today's episode, we'll be interviewing Christopher Bradley, writer and director of the film The Trigger. I would like to welcome Christopher Bradley to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Also here is my co-host, Mike Stan. Thank you.
Thank you.
The reason why we do this show is to discuss the process for future filmmakers out there who might be listening, to talk about what worked and what you would change for your next project, plus any advice you give to our listeners. Christopher, if you want to go ahead and discuss your background in the business and how you started.
I got a bachelor's degree in theater at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, and I got a scholarship there, so that's why I decided to go there. I'd gotten into USC, or been accepted into USC, but there was no way I was ever going to be able to afford it. We were...
I think many people can relate.
We had 8 kids and 0 money, and TCU gave me a scholarship. So I was living in Fort Worth, but Dallas was half an hour away, and at that time there was a tax break in Texas that meant they built enormous sound stages over in Dallas, and a lot of LA and New York productions started shooting there just as I was finishing my theater degree. So I'd worked with a director in the theater program who became an intern at one of the talent agencies over in Dallas and told his boss, "This guy's really good, you've got to sign him as an actor." And they signed me as a model, and I just badgered them, like, send me on acting stuff. I have an acting degree. Just send me. And the first time they sent me out, I did get something. It was like 4 lines in a TV movie. What would happen is they'd cast the major roles in LA and New York, and then the smaller parts they'd cast with locals. So, and then right after that, I got a supporting role in this slasher movie called The Initiation, which just got a Blu-ray release. It's got a following. So I got a couple of credits in Dallas and got in the unions. So again, if I'd been in LA, it might have been much more difficult for me to get a start. There, it was a much smaller pool of actors, and I was able to, because when I got here, I saw actors who were like trying to get like 1 or 2 SAG points at a time, and it could take you 10 years to get into the union. I got in instantly.
Wow.
In Dallas. So
that's a good tip for actors out there.
Yeah, like you might want to start in a smaller pool. I teach screenwriting at Arizona State now, but one of my students asked me, do you think it's luck or skill that people need? And I think everybody has a certain amount of luck. It's just being good at recognizing when it happens. And one of the things that happened was I was living in Dallas, and there was a touring company of a show. This is like so random. There's a touring company of a Broadway production of Pal Joey. And one of the people who lived in the apartment complex with me, somebody had dropped out of the show, so they held local auditions. He got into it, and he asked one of the actresses in the show to come hang out at our pool. And I was really shy at the time. I'm not now, but I was crazy shy at the time. And my boyfriend at the time dragged me over to her and said, "This guy's an actor. He wants your advice." And I was like panicking, and she looked at my resume and said, "Oh God, this is a disaster." She helped me redo my resume, and then she saw me perform in the play that I was doing and said, "Wow, you're really good. My husband's a personal manager in New York. You should look him up if you go to New York." I don't know if she thought I would really do it, but I did. But that's an example of like a piece of luck. Like I fought it actually. The manager in New York ended up signing me. He got me with a pretty major agent in New York who had an office in LA. And so when I moved to LA, I already had an agent. I was already in the unions. And I was homeless. I moved there with $60 and a one-way ticket, which when you ask me to give actors advice, do not do that. It didn't end up in my death, but it was really scary. I didn't ever end up having to sleep outside. I didn't have a car to sleep in. I couch jumped for like 2 or 3 days at a time for a while, and then my agent's assistant, agents don't make any money. I'm sorry, agents' assistants don't make any money, and they make like $400 a month. So my agent told her assistant, hey, how about if you let him stay on your couch? And so she charged me $50 a week while I was saving money to have enough money for an apartment. But if that hadn't happened, I would have been sleeping outside.
Right.
So it's a really bad idea. And at the time, I'm auditioning for Oliver Stone. I'm auditioning for these major films and had nowhere to live. So,
the glamorous life of an actor.
So I got I got a small part in a TV movie about AIDS called An Early Frost. And then I did the first LA production of The Normal Heart with Richard Dreyfuss. I started working in LA, and from the outside, I think people, oh, you're an actor, you make, millions of dollars. It's like there's like 8 people who make the millions of dollars and everybody else is making union minimum and trying not to get evicted. So I remember one of the last things I did in LA, my car was barely running. And this is before I went to go teach at ASU. So my car was barely running. I smell like gas. And I go in to be fitted for this costume. I'm going to be playing a wealthy psychiatrist in this TV show called Standoff at Fox. And they took off my shitty clothes and put on this amazing Italian suit. And I was like, I'm looking in the mirror. I'm like, I can't believe that I could possibly look like this. And so we do the table read and and then I go back into my terrible clothes and like trying to get out of the parking lot without my car breaking down. But that was sort of a quintessential like snapshot of what a lot of actors are like, or their lives are like in LA. But that's how I got started. And when I was 7 years old, I saw The Sound of Music, and I was like, God, we were 8 kids, no money, and I'm looking up on screen. It's like, these kids are like living in this mansion, running around, and their parents are happy and singing. And I want to go there. Exactly. It's like, I want to go there. And I couldn't quite, at 7, I couldn't quite separate out what's the kids' real lives and what's, acting. And I asked my mom, can you take me where those kids got in that movie? And she said, maybe when you're older. And I said, well, when I'm 8, because I thought when I'm 8, I'll be big. But that last job, I was walking from the set to my dressing room, and it's like 3-4 o'clock in the morning. We're shooting all night, and I look up, and there's this mural of Julie Andrews on the side of this 2-story high soundstage, and I realized, oh my God, they shot the interiors here.
Wow.
And I was like, I did it.
You got
my mom couldn't take me there, but I actually got to where those kids, made this movie. And it was a wonderful sort of last job in LA. I've done some other things since then, but that was the last thing I did when I was still living in LA. So
that's awesome. That's a full circle there.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and we'll play a clip from The Trigger.
What if I told you I needed you to give me the best kiss that you've ever given anyone?
Does that feel good, Eric? Answer me, Eric. Does that feel good?
Something bad is happening. What do I not know?
No, Benny, no.
Where are you two going?
Did you say something to them? What did you tell them?
What did you tell them?
So Mr. Smarty Pants is out of jail. What's your next brilliant plan? You gonna sell your ass to that slimy child molester again?
No, I'm sober.
Yeah, me too.
Did I just abandon Mickey?
Yeah, you do. Where are you going?
I'll die if I stay here, Daddy.
You need to get out. You need to pack your shit and get out.
Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about how did you switch from acting into writing and directing?
Well, there were a couple of things. I had a let's call it a breakdown in my late 30s, and I had to kind of stop everything and reassess my life. And at the end of this breakdown, when I started to feel better, I sat down and in a fever, I wrote this screenplay. And I got like Sid Field's book on screenwriting, his initial book, and I used that to write it. And I showed it to some independent film directors and producers that I knew, and they were like, "Wow, this is really good writing. This is really intense. No one wants this." It was religion and child abuse, insanity. It was like no one wants to watch this movie, and homosexuality. And it's like, between those two things, this is like box office poison. No one is going to touch this. And they said, "But you're a really talented writer." And I put it in a drawer and I forgot about it. But apparently one of them gave it to somebody who gave it to somebody who gave it to somebody. And I got this phone call out of nowhere saying, "Is this script available?" And a little production company optioned it. And they didn't end up getting it made. But I was like, if I could do that, not really knowing anything, maybe I should go to school. And I applied to UCLA, and I got into their screenwriting program, into the master's screenwriting program at UCLA. But another part of my frustration and part of the breakdown was that I had, as an actor, you're analyzing scripts. You're doing character arcs. And I realized somewhere along the line, as I was getting older, I'm working for younger and younger directors. And also I was working for people who were they were money guys who wanted to make money, but they didn't know anything about structure. They didn't know anything about thematic communication, and they didn't care. Like I mentioned that slasher movie, The Initiation. It's like, it was a disaster as far as misogyny, as far as what it was communicating about life and the world. It was not something I would have ever wanted to say. And I realized that I knew more about film structure than they did, and I was much more concerned about what I was putting into the stream of life than they were. And it was like, I can't keep driving around the valley auditioning for terrible slasher movies and commercials and soap operas, and I'm spending my life auditioning for stuff that I really don't want to do. I might need to build my own house. I might need to write the stories that I want to tell, because I don't know that anybody else is going to do it. Just as an example, I was doing a low budget film for an action movie for Menachem Golan, who did Canon Pictures and 21st Century Pictures. One of the things that would baffle me was when I'd auditioned for these terrible movies, when I got into UCLA, I was like, everybody I was in school with, it's like every single script these people are writing is genius. Like, how was I in a world before I got here where no one could find a good script? It's like, just go to a film school and say, what do you got? Show me what your students are writing. Where are you getting these terrible movies? And they were producing a gangster movie, like a 1930s gangster movie. And it was like you'd found this great 1930s Jimmy Cagney script in a trunk that never got produced. It was really well written. And so in the script, I'm playing a gangster who's trying to murder his way to the top of this crime syndicate. And the first act break is I get this saloon singer pregnant. And all of a sudden I have to change everything. I have to try to stop everything I've put into action. I've alienated a bunch of people, murdered a bunch of people. And the rest of the script is trying to get her, to the point where the baby survives. And I show up for the first day of shooting and the pregnancy's gone.
Oh, no.
And the director is somebody that had invested money with Menachem Golan, and he's like, I'll give you more money, but I want to direct. So he gave him the script to direct, and he had no idea what he was doing. He did no idea how to direct, no idea of film structure, no idea of anything. And I went to him and I was like, well, how come you took that out? And he said, oh, it just made it too complicated. And I'm like, yeah, this watch spring, it just makes this watch too complicated. Let's just rip that out. And that was an example of, like, with no training, I already knew more about how a movie, what the mechanics of a movie were than the people
financing them.
Yes. And, like, my reasons for wanting to tell a story are put something good into the stream of life, do something that moves the conversation, the overall conversation forward in a clean, healthy, good way. But that's not always the case. It's like, I just want to make a quick buck. Like, it drives me crazy. I'll go to film festivals and it's like someone will ask this director, why'd you make this movie? It's like, well, I saw Reservoir Dogs and it was, like, really cool. And there was, like, guys in black suits. So I wanted to make a movie with, like, cool people in black suits. It's like, that's the level of
the depth that they're giving, yes.
And so I used the term I needed to build my own house. So I moved out of acting because you have, as an artist, you have almost zero control of anything. And in fact, I read a study where test pilot is the most stressful job on earth because you don't know if the plane's going to fly and you're going to end up dead. The second most stressful job in the world is actor. And in both cases, you have zero control over the situation. And I felt like I am a good ethical person who wants to do ethical things, and the pool that I'm existing in, that is not the focus. And if I want that to be the focus, I'm going to have to do something where I control the situation in some way.
So how was the first writing experience in UCLA that you did? Do you remember the script and what it was about and the title?
I believe the first thing I wrote was a script about Nikola Tesla.
Oh.
It was I was writing it for a class, but there was also the Sloan Foundation does a contest where they want to encourage authentic science and powerful depictions of scientists. So the contest is about having correct science so that you don't make Armageddon where there is gravity on asteroids, which there is not. And so that probably would have taken a 2-second Google search to find
right.
out. So I was working for an actress at the time who was like this crazy actress who was involved in all this conspiracy theory stuff. So she took me to her conspiracy theory meeting and they were talking about Tesla and he had invented an anti-gravity machine and the government wouldn't let us have it. And I was like, come on, like this. But then it got me curious about who this guy really was. And he didn't need to invent an anti-gravity machine to be amazing. Like, he had already understood how television could work. He'd already understood how a fax machine could work. This is like 100 years before any of this stuff. Fluorescent lighting he invented. And at the time, they were using direct current, which could only travel like 3 miles. And he figured out how to harness alternating current, which meant you could use Niagara Falls with a water wheel to create electricity that could light up New York, which changed everything. All of a sudden, you could have a 100-story building because you had electricity to run elevators. I mean, his harnessing of alternating current changed everything. And that was magical enough for me. And the more I read about him, it was like he was so focused on the inventions and no concept of business. So he would invent these things and then somebody would say, oh, can I have that? And it's like, yeah, I don't care.
and then they would patent it and then make millions.
Yeah, or billions. I mean, Westinghouse is still around, and Westinghouse is one of the people that took one of his patents for a song. Edison, he had major fights with Edison because Edison had invested a lot of money in direct current already and wanted to discredit alternating current. So there's all of this drama, around his life and the conflicts between, somebody that wants to do something good in the world, but doesn't have all the pieces, doesn't have the business piece. He doesn't have the sort of guile. And watching capitalism just kind of grind him up, I found his story incredibly compelling, and I did win. I won a $10,000 fellowship with that script. The Trigger was actually one of the scripts also that I wrote when I was at UCLA.
Awesome. Let's go in and let's discuss The Trigger. So if you want to give a description, a synopsis about the movie.
Okay. There's a young guy who has been working as a hustler and selling drugs on the street for a more powerful drug dealer. And his girlfriend, who was a straight A student but fell in love with him and ended up doing drugs with him and sort of destroyed her life. And then an older gay man who has been hiring him as a hustler. So the three of them, their lives collapse. The young kid ends up in jail. The girl goes into rehab and gets her GED and gets into a community college out of town. And the older gay man gets sober, moves back in with his ex-boyfriend. And they're pulling their lives together. And when the young kid gets out of jail, he contacts his girlfriend because he wants to get back together with her, and contacts the older gay man because he wants to figure out, how am I going to get money? How am I going to survive in the world? And so they end up back together, and it is a disaster. There's something that they tell alcoholics, stay away from the people that you drank and did drugs with, at least for a long time. And that is a piece of advice the three of them do not take to their intense detriment.
So talk about where the idea for this film came.
I had a ne'er-do-well nephew who was in and out of juvenile detention. My sister was living in Pennsylvania. I was in Albuquerque over Christmas, and they had moved away from Albuquerque to get away from the drug dealers that my nephew was selling drugs for. And but she said, would you please go? It's Christmas Eve. We can't get there. Would you just go make sure that he's not alone on Christmas Eve? So my brother and I went to go visit him. And so part of the young kid is based on my nephew. But he was smiling and talking about that his cellmate was a murderer and how cool that was, and all of these police numbers and terms that he knew. And he was basically like, he was smiling at me, like needling me, like, look what a bad person I am. And I'm just like, I didn't want to listen to it. And the kid next to me was talking to his mother, and I'm overhearing this conversation, and he's crying. And his mother is saying, your dog bit somebody. There's nothing I can do. We're going to have to, they're going to come take him away and have him put down. The city is coming to take him away. And it's like, can't you do something until I can get out of here? I'll go hide him someplace or do something. And the mom's like, no, I got too much to do. It's just a dog. And you had an hour.
This is Christmas Eve, right?
Yeah. And you had an hour to spend. And she left after about 20 minutes. So he's sitting next to me crying. And I didn't want to listen to my nephew. And my brother was talking to my nephew. So I turned and I talked to him. And so part of it, the character is based on my nephew, and part of the character is based on that kid's situation, where after I talked to him, I just tried to imagine, like, who is this mother? Who is this kid? How do you end up in a situation where you have a mother like that, who would on Christmas Eve spend 20 minutes of the hour and spend that time telling you your dog is going to die? Like, who are you? And I just sort of fleshed out my idea of what his life was. That was the seed of the story.
Nice. Go ahead and let's talk about how long did it take from writing the film to actually the first day of shooting?
Well, I wrote it in graduate school, so it was probably it was a good 10, 15 years later when I actually got it into production. I wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing first, so I made a short film called The Violation. There's a term in the film festival world called the $1 million home movie. Like where you spend all this money, the movie's terrible, and only your mom likes it. And so I didn't want to end up with that. So I wrote a 15-minute short film, assembled a crew. I have a friend who was willing to invest money in that short film. I put some of my own money in it, but he put the bulk of it in. And so I assembled a crew, and I was, if I do say so myself, like really good at it. And it was like duck to water.
Was that your first time directing?
Yes. Actually, I had just in a much more simple way, I had directed actors for a couple of animated shorts before that. But this was the first time with a crew and cameras and lights. And the big thing, you asked me, do I have advice for people? The big thing is you cannot control everything. You have to delegate. And you have to find people that you trust and let them do their jobs. One of the things that it was like an experience of like costumes. I know writing, I know directing, I know acting. I know zero about costumes. And I remember the costumer, he was somebody who had been a costumer on a low-budget horror comedy I'd done in the 80s called Waxwork. And so I hired him to be the costumer. And when he brought me the costumes, I was just like, it's like, I can't say you read my mind because none of this would have been in my mind. But it's, you know me and my story better than I do. And he had access to things like there was a Bob Mackie dress. They'll like have the studios will have like garage sales, so you can get like a Bob Mackie dress for like $2.
Wow!
And he put the Beth Grant, who was in Little Miss Sunshine, and she was the gym teacher in Donnie Darko, who's like, I question your commitment to sparkle motion. So I had always loved her, and I got her to be in my short film. But he put her in this Bob Mackie dress, and it was like, I wouldn't know. Where would I know nothing about Bob Mackie. I know nothing about costumes. It's like he found me these amazing things that told the story. And I felt like the image that came into my mind was my arms are 30 feet long because of you. My reach is 2, 3, 5 times what it could possibly be. And it was the same with the cinematographer. Like he looked at the script and he's like, how about if we do this? And it was like, yeah. Like he knew about how to frame things, how to focus on things, how to like decisions about lenses. I know nothing about lenses. I know nothing about cameras. I know nothing about lights. But he explained to me, like, if we do it this way, you can get this aspect of the story. I feel like if I had been a control freak about it and told him what to do, it would not have been nearly as powerful. It's like one of the things one of the actors told me afterwards was he asked me, what do you want me to do? And I was like, well, what do you want to do? And he was like, and he had an answer, and he really had an answer. And he was like, no director ever asked me that before. And it was like, as an actor, it's like, that's what I wished for.
Right.
Like, let me do my job. Like, you can't act for me. But I went home and I pulled the script apart and I analyzed and I made decisions. And it's like, if you let me take your vision, I can take your vision, further than you can do in your directing seat. You can't do everything. And, some of the things that the actors wanted to do, I didn't. I said no. It's like, that's not the direction I want to go. That's not the way I want to tell the story. But I would say 80% of the time, 90% of the time, yeah. It was like they were really good ideas, and
collaborative.
I let them do it.
Well, talk about the production side of it. Like,
okay.
How did you find your cinematographer,
okay,
and your costume designers and your actors for The Trigger?
The guy who put the money into the film was an emeritus professor at UCLA, so he still knew who the like really good student directors, cinematographers, the various tech people that were in the film school, and he found me the cinematographer, and then he assembled the crew from people that he knew. I told you I got Beth Grant to do the film. I had met her at a party, and we had like this 4-hour conversation about everything. It was this amazing conversation, and I never saw her again. I didn't have her number. And I tried to contact her through Facebook. I sent her agent a letter. Every way I could think of to contact her, and I never heard anything back. The casting director, though, I had a friend that suggested a casting director to me, and she said, I have access to the agents in a way that you don't. And she called it a begging letter. And she said, you write the actor a letter and you tell them why you can't possibly make the movie with someone else. And I had written it with Beth Grant in mind, and I wrote her this letter, and she immediately called me, because I don't think the messages ever even got to her before that. And she said, I absolutely remember who you are. I had an amazing afternoon with you. I always wondered whatever happened to that guy. I would love to do your short film. And, we arranged the schedule so that we only needed her for her scenes for one day. So she was like the biggest person we had. So we worked around her. But basically the casting director, like as far as young people, you have these, if it was just me trying to do it, I'd get 1,000 pictures with people with 2 or 3 credits because they're 15, 16 years old. I don't know who are the good ones. I don't know. She knew, because she'd been auditioning these people since they were 7, 8, 9 years old. Now they're 15. Even if they didn't have a lot of credits, she knew who the good people were. And she found me 2 amazing young people. And so she got me Elaine Hendricks, who was in Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion. And so she got me really good professional people that I would never have been able to find. So the cinematographer, getting him was the door to getting the whole crew. And then my own contacts, as far as the costumer went, I knew him from the past. The first AD had also been the first AD on Waxwork, and the costumer suggested, hey, he's been doing this for a long time. He's really good, and he was. So how it ended up working, and I think it would be a lot of people's experience, is you get 1 or 2 key people, and then they're able to find the rest of the people for you.
Is it the same on the Trigger?
On the Trigger, yes, my cinematographer found the crew. He actually found the costumer as well. It was somebody that he'd worked with on commercials. So I put out a notice to the local acting community and was able to cast most of the roles. Then there were 2 roles that I couldn't cast. I was going to do one of them because I couldn't find anybody to do it, but it's like anybody who's directed, like I know directors act in their own movies, but it's like there's so much to do, and your attention is split so many different ways, and it's like every minute you're making 100 decisions. When I act, I am 100% concentrated on like being that character. The idea that I'm going to have to jump in and out of.
Wait, man, the hats?
Yeah, I just couldn't imagine myself doing it, but I was going to have to do it because I couldn't find somebody. There's a woman who runs a website in Phoenix for actors, and she said, no, I know who you need. And they had not responded to the ad, but they did come in and read for me. And they were reading for the drug dealer character, but I put one of them in the drug dealer character and one of them in the role that I was going to do. And then I was able to step out as an actor. So,
which role were you going to do?
I was going to do the dad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but he was really good.
Yeah. He's good in the film.
Yeah.
So talk about your first day of shooting.
Well, the first day...
What scene was it?
The first day of shooting was really easy. I believe we started with one of the scenes at the drug dealer's house, and a neighbor of mine owns 2 historic houses in the neighborhood and let me use her house to shoot in, and everything went great. A more horrifying moment was that restaurant, the pizza place in the movie. There was a real pizza place. I live in a historic district near downtown Mesa in Arizona, and it's different, in LA, if you make an agreement with somebody that you're going to use their space, they understand what movie making is. And so we show up with the cube truck to start setting up. And they're like, oh, yeah, sorry, we forgot to call you. We rented it out for a wedding.
Oh, no.
So we're ready to bring the lights in. We're ready to set up. And we have nowhere to shoot. And we've got, it's an 18-day shoot. I mean, we've got to shoot an entire movie in 18 days. We can't miss a day. So the line producer and I are running up and down Main Street
Looking for alternatives?
Yeah, and a lot at that time, this is, the economic downturn like shut down 90% of Mesa. So there's like for rent signs everywhere. So we're calling real estate companies. Can we use this? And we found a coffee shop that said, yes, you can use it for $500 a day, which of course we have not budgeted for.
Right.
But what are we going to do? So so it's a coffee shop. It's one of those places where they've got like beat up couches. It looks like your mom's basement.
Right.
And it has to look like a pizza place. So I go to my art director. It's like, can you? And she started to cry. And then she pulled it together and she said, I will do it. Yes. And she went out and got tables. She went to a dollar store and got like those red gingham tablecloths, little centerpieces. I looked at it and I was like, I couldn't believe that she turned this place into a pizza place in 4 hours, but she did it.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
It actually turned out to be, since we were paying for it, it turned out probably to be for the best because we had a lot more say in them staying closed. Like he was never going to make $500 in this abandoned strip of downtown. He would never have made $500 a day selling coffee. So he was willing to stay closed for us. And that's another piece of advice I want to give people. It's like sort of like you got to be liquid with things.
Right.
Like you have your idea and then things go to hell. But it's like one of the things I learned was rather than panicking, it's like asking yourself, how can this be a good thing? And that actually turned out to be a really good place to shoot because we didn't have to stop shooting to let them open. It gave us a lot more wiggle room as far as like, I wanted another shot. It's like, if it was somebody else's place and they needed to open, it would be like, it's 9:00 in the morning. They need to open, get out.
Yeah.
It was like, we had it and we could have some breathing room to shoot more takes, to, get more shots, to get more fancy in there. So
that's great. Talk about filming in Mesa, Arizona. What was that experience?
So I am a socialist, and I am every right-winger's nightmare. But in this case, this is Mesa, Arizona. They call themselves the most conservative city in America. But one of the good things about shooting in some place like Mesa is, you have to get a film permit. So I went to the Mesa City government. They didn't read the script. They had no idea what I was doing. They had no interest in what I was doing. They gave me a piece of paper. I signed it. They made a copy of it, gave it to me. They said, if the police stop you, then just show them that you have a film permit. They had no interest in what I was doing. If they had read the script, I'm sure they would have had a problem with it, but thank God. So
they didn't even ask for a synopsis or anything?
Didn't ask me any questions. So in that case, a little libertarianism played in my favor, and we did get. There are some dicey areas in Mesa, some kind of dangerous areas, and we were shooting in a parking lot, and we were shooting a scene where people are yelling at each other, and somebody in one of the buildings nearby called the police. And said, there are people having, I don't know what's going on. There's a huge group of people and they're screaming and yelling. And the police came. I showed them the thing and they went away. And so in LA, I think it would have, in some place like LA, I think it would have been a much more difficult process. You would have had to pay for the permit. I didn't have to pay them anything. So I would say that there are pluses and minuses. One of the minuses is if you want to have established actors in your movie, you got to put them in a hotel, you got to fly them out. And the lead kid has a very long resume. He was living in LA, so I did have to I had to fly him out. I had to put him up in a hotel. So what you're saving by shooting someplace other than LA, it can
benefit somewhere else.
Yeah, it can get expensive in other places.
Nice. That's really good. Talk about working with the actors, developing these characters, getting the story. And how many rewrites did you do?
Oh.
Did you do any?
tons and tons and tons of rewrites over the 15 years between when I wrote it. I had a number of times where people were interested. I had a number of times where people were interested in doing it, and they asked me for changes. There was a Latina actress who wanted to do it, and so she worked with me to rewrite it in a way that she, would be more centered in the neighborhood where she was from. And I took those things out of the version that I did, but in the process of writing it, it was like, oh, actually, go this direction. Develop. The character development stuff stayed, even if the specific location stuff didn't stay. There were probably like 3 times where people were interested in it, and I did rewrites for them. So at one point, the writer-director of the movie Circuit, Dirk Schaefer, was trying to get it set up. So I did a number of rewrites along with him. And again, some of it stayed, some of it didn't. It wasn't so much scenes that stayed, but it was like concepts that would stay, like deepening the characters, thinking through the logic of why the characters were doing what they were doing. And so there were many. I don't know if I could count how many rewrites that it went through.
When production started, did the rewrites stop, or did they still continue as you were filming?
So I teach screenwriting at ASU, and one of the things, like, I'll have students be frustrated, like, oh, I have to do another rewrite. It's like, dude, you're on your second rewrite. It's like you don't even know. Yeah, it's like you're gonna rewrite this after you shot it. The editor is rewriting it. You're going to be cutting. You're going to add an off-screen line. The rewriting really never stops. So on the set, also, you have situations where, because of who you cast, because of how they look, because of how they sound, or because they're really good as an actor, like, it's like, I don't need that line. What that line is saying is all over your face. We don't need it. And so you'll find yourself tightening all over the place. It just occurred to me, because I really pride myself on writing in a really, really tight way. And I remember with The Violation, the short film that I did, the editor, he probably cut like 5 or 6 lines out of it. And I was like, dare you? You do everything that was in there, absolutely, and I looked at it, it's like, no, you're right. Like, I don't need that line. And that's again with, you talked about assembling the crew after you're done. In post-production, you're again having to delegate things and having to trust people. And with The Trigger, the editor and she felt like she was finished, and I felt like we should cut another 15 minutes out of it. And we did.
And just so everyone knows, this is a feature film.
Yes, yeah. But you also have to listen. Like, it's a combination of listening to people, but in the end, it's your movie. And this is something that I say to my writing students too, because I'll give them extensive notes. I'll cut whole scenes. I'll cut chunks out of scenes. But what I tell them is, I'm not God. I know a lot more about writing than you do. But if I've cut something out that's like, I'm going to be missing a whole chunk of my character, or this is going to pay off later. I'm setting something up here. Like, you know your story better than I do, so don't let me
dictate.
Yeah, like, don't be intimidated by me. But I do invite them to, like, read that scene with that chunk gone and tell me that there's anything missing. And almost always they're like, what I'm cutting out is something that's repetitive or something that's already been established earlier. I'm almost always right. Not always right, but almost always right. And with her, a lot of what I wanted to take out were dramatic pauses. It's like, we've got the point. when you're writing a scene, you have conflict. The whole story builds to a climax, but every scene, the conflict builds to a climax. And once you have the climax, you want to get out. And it wasn't so much in the writing, but in the editing that we stayed on someone's reaction too long. And I wanted to, we've had the climax, we've seen the reaction, get out. And her style was, I would say, much more contemplative than what I wanted. So,
we'll talk about working with the actors and the cast. How was that experience?
Every bad experience I had as an actor, I wanted to do
the opposite of.
I wanted to fix that in the world. It's like I wanted to give these actors the opposite experience of what happened. If I can tell a quick story about that horror movie
Please
that I mentioned, the Initiation. So again, with a location that we had to get out of, we're shooting in a shopping center, and we had to be out by 7:00 in the morning, and that means turn off the cameras, pick up the lights, put them in the truck, and be out of the parking lot by 7:00. It's 6:15. And in the film, I get my throat slit in the bathroom. So they have to put this rubber appliance on my neck, and they're going to use a syringe, put some blood in it, and then it's dripping down onto me. And the special effects guy got his hands wet. So the rubber appliance is wet. So my neck is wet. So nothing is sticking, and he's panicking, trying to get my neck dry. He's got a blow dryer, trying to get his fingers dry, but they're sticky with, it's Caro syrup dyed red. And he's completely freaking out. Of course, everybody else is freaking out too. The director's freaking out. And, I'm 22 years old. I've just finished my acting degree. This is the second professional job I've ever had. And he comes over and gets pretty close to my face and says, "What is taking you so long?" I was just like, "I don't know. I guess I don't have a sticky enough neck." How is this my fault? But he's the director, and I knew who he was, and he had done all this TV work, and I'm not going to yell back at him, but I'm just completely frozen. And his first AD grabbed him by the back of his shirt and pulled him away and said, I could hear them talking, and said, "You go back and apologize to that actor, or I quit." And so he walked back over and he said, "Yeah, I'm really sorry. It wasn't fun." And I've got another story for you. So this is again nightmare director story. So I've got this scene. This is when I was working for Menachem Golan. So God bless you, Menachem, in heaven or wherever. So we're shooting this scene. It's in that gangster movie. So I'm running down this hallway, screaming at this other gangster, trying to kill him, and firing my gun, and just insane anger. And I run. There's been a gun battle already, and I run by a dead body, and I need to stop and see that it's my brother. And I need to fall to my knees, pull him into my lap, and scream and start to cry. And it's extraordinarily difficult transition. And again, this is a low budget film. So I've got to make that transition. And a lot of that movie I did in one take because you just didn't. It's Menachem Golan. They don't care if it's good. I care if it's good,
right.
But they don't care if it's good. It's as long as it's in the can, it doesn't matter. So I'm back behind one of the flats, and as an actor, I would do major homework on the characters. I had pages and pages and pages of handwritten notes. So I'm going over my notes and thinking about, my brother and our lives together and our mother's funeral together. And I'm really getting into how much I love him, so that when I see him dead, I'll be able to do that transition and burst into tears. And I hear from the other side of the flat, "Okay, we are ready to shoot if Chris Bradley is done doing his actor studio bullshit."
Wow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I try to make your movie good?
Wow.
So that's the the antithesis of how a director should treat an actor.
Oh.
And when I look at that scene, to my credit, I completely blew him off. And I am extraordinarily proud of in that movie, extraordinarily proud of that moment. So I worked a number of times with Tommy O'Haver, who did Billy's Hollywood Screen Kiss. I did a couple of short films with him, and then that feature film. And I remember learning from him. We had a number of times that I found out later, these catastrophic things would happen where, like, he had gotten like rented sound equipment that didn't work.
Oh no!
Like stuff that was. It wasn't exactly that, but it was catastrophic things that had happened. You never knew. Like smiling, calm. What do you need? Like he never let you see. When I found out later what had happened behind the scenes, I was just like, God, you're a good actor. Like, how did we never know, like, that these horrible things had happened? And I wanted to be that guy for the actors too, because it's such a stressful job, and you're out of control, and you're depending on, are they lighting me right? Are they, how are they shooting me? Do I look okay? Is my acting any good? I remember a scene in one of the Gunsmoke TV movies that I did where the sun was going down, and this is again a panic moment. So they lit the actress. So it's me and this actress. We're a married couple, and we're having this romantic scene, and the sun is going down, and they have her lit beautifully, but the sun was too low, and we're running out of time, and they just threw a light on me. And this is actor ego, so forgive me, but one of my teeth is a little behind the other one on the left-hand side, which you can't really see when I smile, except light me really hard from the right, and it's like black.
Oh.
And I looked like I'm orange because the sun is going down, and I'm missing a tooth. I looked like a pumpkin. So we're shooting back and forth between, she looks like a goddess, and it's this very soft, lovely, romantic scene between this goddess and a Halloween pumpkin. And I've had friends watch the scene, and it's like, no, you can barely see it. It's like, of course, it's all like completely exaggerated in my mind. But I wanted always to like make sure that the actors were listened to, that their ideas for how they wanted to do the scene were taken into account. And like I said earlier, I did listen to them, and they had really good ideas, and I used them. I wanted to make sure that they were listened to, let them use their ideas, and keep them out of anything to do with production stress. Like, they should never know anything is going wrong. And I wasn't perfect. There's a scene in the film where I find, this is me being OCD, but I find like products showing up on screen. I find it really distracting. And somebody was using, like cutting cocaine with baking soda. And I wanted to make sure that the baking soda box was always turned to the back so you couldn't see the corporate label. And while moving things, it got turned back around. And again, we can do a couple of takes for everything because we're shooting really fast. And I saw that it was turned towards the camera, and I was like, "Oh, who did that?" And I was like, "Oh, no. Like, I don't want to. I never. It's the only time, And it was after like 10 hours of shooting, but I wanted to be very conscious of being kind, and particularly in a situation where I'm not the only one who's been working for 10 hours. Yeah. We're all tired, and we've all got a million things that we're trying to keep track of. And actors have a reputation for being temperamental, I guess, for being wussies, I guess. You have control over nothing, and you get blamed for everything. And they do need to be babied. They do, because they're the tip of the needle. They're getting the worst of everything.
So you said you budgeted for 18 days shoot. How was the planning for those 18 days? And besides the pizza place, did everything else go according to plan, or were there more interesting stuff that went on?
I was actually, other than that, I was extraordinarily blessed. I used my own house. And then I had I live in a historic...
For Heather's house?
For Heather's house, yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
So I live in a historic district, and so around the corner from me, I have a friend that owns 2 houses that are next door to each other. So we shot it so that you can't see that they're next door to each other, but...
was the other house the drug dealer's house?
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Yeah. It doesn't look like it's... Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so it's so the drug dealer's house and Eric's mother's house are actually right next to each other. The good thing about that, and again, piece of advice for new filmmakers, is the big time killer is moves.
Right.
So you want everything to be as close together as it can possibly be. And so my house and those 2 houses and the pizza place are all within like half a mile from each other. The low rent apartment that Eric gets is actually in Phoenix. So that was worth losing time and money on the move because we got it for a very good price. This was a very bad neighborhood, but that particular strip of apartments had a lot of empty apartments at the time, and the owner needed money. So he let us rent the apartment. We rented one of the apartments, and then we had another empty apartment to use to store the lighting equipment at night, and then another empty apartment to use as our production office. So there wouldn't have been any way to have that much production space for that price. I mean, he was a friend of somebody on the crew, and it happened to be that he was desperate. So just going to an apartment complex and trying to get 3 apartments would have been crazy expensive. So, but get everything as close together as you possibly can so that you won't have to do as few moves as possible. So having those 2 houses next to each other meant we did have to move the equipment from one house to another, but that's half an hour, not 3 hours.
Right.
So
after the 18 days, you wrapped shooting. How long was post-production?
God. Post-production took almost 3 years. And that is, my investor gave me money. He gave me a third of the money. I put a third of the money in, and my cinematographer put a third of the money in. But post-production, I needed to figure out on my own. So I'm a college professor, and during the summer, I can teach online classes for extra money. So I would have a few $1,000s to do a little bit of post-production, and then the next summer, a few $1,000s to do some post-production. Another thing that I learned, it would never take that long again, because I didn't go to like a post-production house because I made the assumption I'd never be able to afford their prices. And I was wrong. So one of my colleagues who produces like shows for the Comedy Channel, and I was talking to him about my struggles, and he said, no, just go to, there's this place called Studio One. He said, just go to them, and show them your film and they'll cut you a deal. I was like, oh. So I showed it to them, and they really liked the film. And what they did, which was really smart, is they have their expensive guy, like the color correction. Mm-hmm. So they have their expensive guy, and he would do a keyframe to show the inexpensive guy, this is the basic idea of what you should do. And then the inexpensive guy would do the grunt work. So I wouldn't have to pay the expensive guy to do the whole movie. Thing. So there was him, and then they had a sound designer, like an in-house sound designer. And he said, if you do all the work here, God, he cut the price like 70% or something. I got an incredible deal, and I got really, really good people. And one of the things about the color correction is it's supposed to be December, and we shot it in July. In Mesa, which if anybody knows anything about Arizona, it's like 115 degrees, and you have people walking, running around in coats. My poor actors, God bless them, especially this stuff. They're so upset in the movie that they're sweating, but they're also really hot. But the color correction guy, you have a blue sky, so he was able to do a color correction that turns the sky white. puts...
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it puts a blue wash over everything so that he turned the summer light into winter-looking light. The Soundguy, again, if anybody's from Arizona, you have these cicadas, and we would kick the tree in front of my house to get them to shut. They'll shut up for like 10 seconds, get the shot, and but you couldn't always get them to shut up. And then there's the tree down the block but there would be no cicadas in December, so that would be a giveaway that we weren't shooting in the winter. But the good thing about cicadas is they're on a rhythm, so the Soundguy could figure out where is that rhythm in this, graph of the sound and cancel it out. So he was able to take all the cicada noises out. And again, this is stuff like, I'm a writer, I'm a director, I'm an actor, but I have no idea of this technical stuff. Like in my acting days, if you had something in the shot and you don't have any money, you're pretty much screwed. So now with digital, though, doing corrections is like nothing. Or it's not nothing. I mean, you have to be skilled to do it, but it's like it's totally possible. So the scene where the dad falls next to the car, making that look real was very difficult with the editing. And so I'm concentrating on that and, him falling, pulling her getting out of the car and everything. And I got it the way that I wanted. And then I look up and there's a light stand with a bright blue sandbag next to the tree in the background.
Oh, like, no.
And I'd spent weeks like working with the editor to get this thing right. And because we were concentrating on one part of the frame, we never looked up to see this thing. And so the color correction guy was like, nah, it doesn't matter. And like, he just erased it.
Wow.
And another one was, this is a rookie mistake. Here's another piece of advice for any filmmakers. Do not put a clock that works behind someone's head. Because it will be 1:15, then it's 1:30, then it's, quarter till, then it's, and so there's this clock behind this character's head that's just going all over them. And
I didn't even.
No, it's fixed.
Oh,
but
okay.
The editor told me, nobody's going to be looking at that. And it's like me with my OCD. It's like anybody like me is going to see it. And so what's interesting digitally now is, like, I thought he was going to have to like do it frame by frame, but the computer will recognize where it'll figure out where that clock is, because it's also, there's handheld, so the clock is not staying exactly still. It's, so it's not like you could just paste it on because the frame is still. And but the computer will find that clock, so we just set the time, still with the time on it, and the computer found it in every single frame and fixed it.
That's pretty amazing.
And there's the hardest one though was give two pieces of advice for new filmmakers. So like renting a cab for the day would have been very expensive. And I think if you were a big budget filmmaker, you just would have done that. You would have like rented from a car rental place. You would have gotten the cab for the day. Me, with my 18-day micro budget, we called a cab. And we told him, just keep your meter running for as long as it takes us to shoot this scene. And it was like $20-$30 instead of a few $100 to rent the car for the day. So when we're cutting the movie, though, I'm suddenly like, it never occurred to me. The logo for this cab company is across the entire side of the cab.
Oh.
And what if they tell me, oh, no, we're not going to be part of your movie. We're going to sue you or whatever. That one, because the car door opens, that took him a long time. He did have to do that frame by frame and erase the logo out of the shot, and that was complicated and time consuming. But he was able to do it, and I would challenge anybody to look at that scene and be able to tell that anything digitally had been done.
No, that's incredible.
The other thing was my production manager was actually an Arizona State University police officer, so he got us a car. He got us his car for the day, so we didn't have to rent a police car. But he could only do it for one day, and we have a scene at the end where the police need to pull up.
Yeah.
And we did that we just got a blue and red light.
Oh,
so
smart.
The blue and red lights are going across her face, but it completely sells it. So
that wasn't a cop car?
I'd have to look. I don't believe it was. I think it was just
wow.
a white car with a bright spotlight on it.
Oh, wow.
If it was a cop car, I know that it wasn't there anymore when we were shooting her. So maybe we had it for a brief time, if that is a cop car, but I don't think it was. But by the time we were shooting her, though, we just had a blue and red flashing lights on her face.
Wow.
So one of the things a low budget forces you to do is be creative and figure out, how am I going to get this shot? And you don't want to be cheap in a way that's going to damage your story. But if you can save money and tell the story perfectly, that's the sweet spot.
Now, what do you hope audiences get from this film?
What I hope people will get from the film is catharsis, I think, would be the biggest word. We've talked some about what I did and didn't know. There are marketing questions I did not ask myself when I was making the film. I had something that I wanted to say about the person who survives, without spoilers, is the person who tells the truth and operates honestly. And the people who don't are the ones that die. And I made the film for people who are new in sobriety and who I'm sure feel like no one gets it. People who have no experience with addiction have watched the movie and said, what are these people, nuts? Like, why would you do that? And it's like, I don't know, but that's how addicts act.
Yeah.
It's not logical. It's not good. It is counterproductive. It is idiotic decisions that addicts make.
Yeah, it's shedding light on a topic that most people who haven't experienced it don't understand it.
And hopefully
they will,
creating compassion and empathy for those people. So I'm hoping for a cathartic experience for people, particularly people who are new in sobriety. Like, there's what you want, and like with gay film in the 80s and 90s in particular, it's like any gay characters that I saw when I was growing up were humiliating stereotypes, or they were murdered, or they ended up with disastrous lives. And what started happening and why gay film took off in the 90s was it's like, that's me up on screen. Somebody is telling my story. And you have like fundamentalist Christian movies. A lot of people who aren't fundamentalist Christians don't even know they exist. They have a massive audience because you have Christians who feel like the only depictions of me are cartoons or stereotypes, and this shows me a mirror, to myself. And I feel like a lot of conversation about addiction is either super glamorized. It's like, yeah, I go around murdering people with a submachine gun and I'm a glamorous drug dealer and I beat people up. Or
the tragic story.
Or the tragic story. Or that they have easy answers drive me crazy. Mm-hmm. And what I wanted to do with the film was everybody is in a double bind. It's like, when he gets out of jail, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, the jail system in the United States right now, and my nephew that I spoke about was in this situation. It's like, you've got a felony conviction. You have to say that on your job application that you have it. It's like, how are you ever supposed to have, you're never going to be able to get a job where you can make enough money, where you can get an education. Like, everything is set up. You're on parole. Somebody's always watching you. The minute you make the kind of mistake anybody makes, you're back in jail again. You've lost another 6 months. You've lost another year. You have to explain to somebody, why is there this gap in your work history? Like, everything is set up to, once you're in the system, to munch you up more and more and more. And I wanted to create compassion for someone who is in that situation and makes really bad decisions. But it's like, but decisions that you could understand why they would make them. The gay character, I wanted to take that. You have the this stereotype of the older manipulative gay man. I wanted to take that and complicate it. It's like, it's not, because I've seen this so many times where you have somebody they're desperate to believe that somebody loves them and they're not just after them for their assets. It's like this guy loves me, and the way that I've seen my fellow gay men delude themselves. I'm not taking advantage of the person. We are in love. And it's like, and it's not as complicated as you are taking advantage of them. There can be, like, both things can exist at the same time. That somebody is desperate and does need your help, but that there actually can be friendship there. There actually can be love there. And it's like it's not one or the other. Like the two streams, can move side by side. So I wanted to take that stereotype and turn it on its head and complicate it, and to again create compassion for that character. Like, why does that guy make the decisions that he makes? How did he end up in a situation where he's so self-deluded? And I'm hoping that there will be discomfort. Like, I wouldn't make that decision, I don't think, but I can see why. I can see why he did. And with all three characters, like the bad decisions that they make, I want people to see themselves in those characters and understand why people would when you're in that level of desperation, why would you do those things?
And empathize with it.
Yes.
As someone who did see the film, I would say I think you accomplished it.
Thank you.
Well, a job well done.
Thank you.
What's next for you with this film, and what's next for you as a writer-director?
So it's going to be available on Amazon Prime in June 21st.
Mark your calendars, everyone. June 21st, Amazon Prime. You do not want to miss this.
It's also the distributor's website, Aristocal. If you just Google Aristocal, it's ARIZTICAL. They have their own streaming site where you can also stream it. I am still entering it in film festivals as well. So if you keep an eye out for it at any local film festivals. What's next for me as a writer-director, though, is I'm putting together my next film. And The Violation and The Trigger are both very, very dark. So the next film I'm doing is a comedy. and also, comedy is... They say as an artist, you always want to do the next thing that scares you. And as an actor, I guest starred on sitcoms. Like I did an episode of like Family Ties in the 80s and My Sister Sam. And with a sitcom, you have the audience, you have a live audience. Mm-hmm. You know if the joke landed because they laugh. When we did Billy's Hollywood Screen Kiss, with a movie, it's dead silent. And I remember, it's like, I know how to time a joke. I know I timed it right, but I did the joke and it's like,
crickets.
Yeah. And the level of panic in my gut. And then when the director said cut, everybody did laugh. It's like, oh my God, that was really good. That was really great. And it's like, what was it? and again, having no control, the editor, what if the editor doesn't time it the way I timed it? Mm-hmm. What if it's not funny because of what he does? And it's completely out of your control. So I want to explore that from the other direction. And it's a huge risk and really scary. I know that the script is really funny and I want to...
It's already written?
Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
It's called Pitiful and Incomprehensible Demoralization, which is a term people in AA will recognize from the Big Book. But it's a guy who is trying to finish his AA ninth step. And he's always gotten to the ninth step and then never been able to finish it. He's always gone back to drinking and drugs. And he gets this insane, rule-oriented Nazi sponsor who's like, you're going to finish it this time. And this is the step in AA where you go and make your apologies to everybody you've ever hurt. And every time he apologizes to someone, he ruins their life. But he won't stop because he's got to finish his ninth step because if I don't finish it, I'm going to die. And so the catastrophes build and build and build and build to the climactic moment where somehow everything works out. The right people are dead. And the right people end up with the right people. It's dealing with dark subject matter. Certainly people do die in the movie.
So dark comedy.
It's a dark comedy, but it's more lighthearted than that term might indicate. So. I'm really excited about getting on with it. And also just all of this, some of the stuff that I've covered here, all of the stuff that I've learned, like I'm like, I feel like a car revving its engine. Like I can't wait to put the things that I learned into practice again, because, like I said, it took me 3 years to do the post-production. It's like, I'm going to be stronger and faster and less panicked about things and like energy that I spent having to grind through the learning process. Now I'll be able to put directly into the creative process. All of that energy will go onto the screen rather than onto effort. So.
Awesome. So if anyone wanted to follow you or find a website or anything, do you want to promote any social media website that you might have?
I'm my Facebook page is facebook.com/the Christopher Bradley. There is also a website for The Trigger. I think it's facebook.com. I think it's The Trigger Movie. But if you just put The Trigger and movie into the search bar, you'll find it there. And I'll be making announcements on that Facebook page.
Awesome. Everyone go follow that right now. And also want to ask you, what are some of your favorite films? What are some of your favorite movies? Let's get an idea of your type of personality, if we couldn't tell already.
Let's see. Two Mulholland Drive.
Oh, David Lynch.
And Eraserhead.
Oh, Lynch fan.
One of the things that I actually love about those things, I teach screenwriting and I teach film structure. And one of the things I remind my students of is you do want to understand what film structure is and what standard Western storytelling is like. And it's sort of been there since Aristotle. But you also want to expose yourself to all kinds of other types of storytelling. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I really love about Mulholland Drive is it has such an eccentric structure that works so beautifully. There are a couple of movies that not a lot of people have seen that I like to have an opportunity to tell people to watch. One of them is I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore. And it won the Audience Award at Sundance. Netflix bought it. It's on Netflix, but they never promoted it. And this movie is so incredible. And it's a dark comedy.
And say the title again for everyone.
I Don't Feel at Home in This World Anymore. Elijah Wood is in it, and I've never thought of Elijah Wood as being funny. And he's a revelation in this film. He is a revelation as a comedian. I've never thought of him as being a comedian. I used the word cathartic a lot, I guess, in this interview, but it was like, it's really, really funny, but it's so good at like wish fulfillment. Like, I wish I could get away with being that way. I wish I could. What happens in the film is the lead actress, she's a low-paid nurse, and she comes home from work and her house has been burglarized and they've stolen her laptop and they've stolen the only thing she values, which is her grandmother's silver. And she's going to get them back. And she doesn't care who has to die to get, and it's like a low rent burglary ring that has done this. And she should have given up long before she does, but she gets it back. And it's an incredibly funny, for as many horrible things and as many people who die in the movie, it's incredibly warm-hearted and life-affirming, weirdly, for as many people who die in the film. And I just absolutely loved it. Another film that not a lot of people saw was Enough Said, which has Julia Louis-Dreyfus and James Gandolfini.
Yeah, that's a great film.
So it's his last movie. Yeah. And again, never thought of him as being funny. And interestingly, I told that story about Billy's Hollywood Screen Kiss, that apparently on the set, he would finish a scene and he would just go into a panic like, I suck. this is going to be such a humiliation. Like, why did I do this? And he is so funny in it and heartbreaking in it. Like, I can't even say the line he says in the movie. He says, "You broke my heart." And it's like seeing James Gandolfini like say that line is like, because he's such a tough guy. And so seeing him be funny and seeing him be vulnerable is like a huge revelation. And what an incredible movie to go out on. As a career. And you saw it. Yeah. I Julie Louis-Dreyfus. I wasn't surprised how funny she is, but she's incredibly funny. She's one of the it's sort of like the Curb Your Enthusiasm no filter people. That she has no concept of how to behave in the world and is always saying the wrong thing. And she's really, really funny in that. But Harold and Maude, of course, everybody there's people love that film, but that's a real touchstone film for me in my life. Donnie Darko. I saw the poster. It looked like an arty indie film that was going to be like really self-consciously arty, and I didn't have any interest in it, and I've seen it 25 times.
It's a great film.
And
Jake Gyllenhaal, Maggie Gyllenhaal. It's
Little Miss Sunshine is another film I've seen many, many, many times.
We're starting to see a pattern here.
What's Up, Doc?
Oh, What's Up, Doc?
And it's interesting. One of the things that's, as I'm hearing myself talk, I do think about dark things a lot. So I'm a little surprised at all the comedies that are coming up, but they do tend to be about pretty dark subject matter. They say that the hardest things to talk about, doing them comedically makes it a lot easier for people to get the message. Mm-hmm. And what would you say the pattern is? Actually, I'm curious because I did have a lot of comedies, but there's
dark comedies
and dark, just dark, like Donnie Darko and Eraserhead. I don't know.
Mulholland Drive.
Well, yeah, I don't know how much darker than Eraserhead you can possibly get.
Requiem for a Dream, but that's the difference.
Oh, yeah, well, that should be on my list, though. I mean, Requiem for a Dream, I don't know how... that one is very hard for me to analyze as a writer because it is relentlessly dark and
raw
and compelling the entire way through. Like I would have expected to become so exhausted that I couldn't watch it anymore. And there's something, it's almost like you're doing cocaine along with the actors. Like you get more and more and more and more adrenaline pumping as the story goes. I think with Requiem for a Dream as well, having lived through the 80s, like there were so many people who, when I was in college, I lived in an apartment complex with a songwriter and a graphic designer and somebody who did animation. She would do tiles, which would animate a story on a bar top. Like that was her specific job. That's what she sold. And we were this group of we were 22 years old, just massively motivated, artistic, just like so much power and energy behind what we wanted to do. And I actually wasn't pot just made me instantly paranoid. Cocaine just made me so uncomfortable. Like I never got into drugs, but I was a very heavy drinker. And so we were like so full of ideas and so full of power and passion. And then cocaine happened and AIDS happened. And I just watched these people just it was like a catastrophic multi-car accident where everyone burned to death. And when so many people died. And when I watch Requiem for a Dream, I feel like they really captured that like it's both, they're young and beautiful and strong and smart and creative and
the downfall
and just and the the catastrophe that befalls them. I think that is that's one of the most cathartic movies I've probably ever seen. And maybe the cathartic aspect of it is what is so attractive about it. You know, you feel like somebody gets what it's like to be a drug addict and an alcoholic. Like, it isn't all bad as you are dying, you know, like as the catastrophe is happening, there is still something so brilliant and beautiful, even in the death, even in the disaster. Ultimately, I would say it's not worth it, but you understand. It's like, what are you, stupid? Like, your life is collapsing. Why aren't you running away? I think that film captures why people don't run away, why they stay. The mom character too, you know, it's like,
yes,
it's like she doesn't understand like what's in her head and what's actually happening to her body and her mind are completely at odds. And it's one of the smartest movies I've ever seen. One of the best art directed movies I've ever seen. And
it's
then
a great film.
And then acting, like the courage of like Jennifer Connelly. Reading that script, like her agent reading that script, it's like you're going to have double dildo sex on camera. It's like, like what actress would be brave enough to do that scene? I have so much respect for her that she just did it. She braved that.
Requiem for a Dream.
Requiem for a Dream.
But also make sure to check out The Trigger, June 21st, Amazon Prime Video, and also local film fests. So thank you so much.
Yes,
Christopher,
I'm really grateful to you guys. The reason why you're doing this, like, what a great service to independent filmmakers. I'm really, really grateful that you've decided to do this. And it's we're in a world now where independent film, it's like Fox Searchlight's, you know, like it's the studio's independent arm. The kind of people who are actually making those kinds of independent films, they need an ally, and I am blown away that you guys have taken that on as part of what you're doing in life. So I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mike, as well. If you'd like to know more information about us, visit our website, moviemenupodcast.com. We'll be back with more interviews. Until next time, thank you guys, and goodbye.